Welcome to Uplink. The aviation dialogue starts here. I'm Shasta Ways.
And I'm Michael Wiles.
Thank you for joining us. Michael, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Shasta. How are you doing?
Good. There's some exciting things going on in aviation this week.
Yeah, aviation and aerospace. And I think it really follows up what we talked about last week in terms of policy and how policy could drive innovation. So what is in the news, Shasta?
So exciting news for SpaceX. SpaceX is cleared by the FAA to launch its first orbital Starship flight, which will happen today. And that is really exciting. To give you a summary, the Federal Aviation Administration issued a Starship launch license to SpaceX. And this is a crucial final regulatory step that clears the company to attempt an orbital launch of its own towering rocket for the first time. SpaceX, with the FAA license now in hand, aims to launch Starship as soon as this morning from its private facility in Texas, which is along the Gulf Coast. The Starship is scheduled to take off to launch at 7 a.m. Central Time. So in February, SpaceX completed a test firing of the Super Heavy booster, which has 33 Raptor engines at its base, in one of the final technical steps towards the launch.
So this is a very big deal for SpaceX and almost like a culmination or another step in what has been really like a 20+ year journey. You know, SpaceX was officially started, I believe, founded in 2002, almost like 21 years later. Elon had this idea that we needed to become a spacefaring species, and beyond just going back to the moon and so forth, what came out of SpaceX were just other benefits, such as this thing Starlink that we're now seeing the benefits of. So they're putting up satellites in space to boost connectivity around the world. And this is one thing that the aviation industry specifically is looking to benefit from. So what I love about innovation in these spaces is that there are these downstream effects that we get to realize later on.
To kind of learn more about SpaceX history, we both listened to a podcast. Amazing. It's called Business Wars, SpaceX versus Blue Origin. And this podcast does such an incredible job of just taking you back briefly to the start of both of these companies, the founders, their interests in aviation. They also talk about Virgin Galactic as well. But the biggest thing is it just talks about SpaceX's origins and how they were so frustrated with the high cost and just not being able to access certain materials and equipment to launch their space program. And, at one point, Elon Musk goes to Russia to negotiate rockets with the Russians because they were better priced. And then he left the meeting and said, we have to figure out a way to do all of this internally. And it's quite amazing to see all of the progress that SpaceX has made throughout the years. I feel like they've, once they got their first rocket launch, things moved relatively quickly. And it also talks about their SpaceX's relationship with the FAA and NASA, and how it started off on a very rocky start. And, once they started proving their concept, they eventually came on board, NASA as a partner. So great podcast to tune into just to learn a little bit about SpaceX's start and their developments throughout the year.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is if you're trying to, sometimes bring something to the world that might be disruptive, not that you're intended to be disruptive, but in building it might cause some pushback from the status quo. You sometimes just, if you believe enough in your vision, you have to do what you have to do to make it work. And you can see, that's sort of minus some of the idiosyncrasies of Elon Musk's side, like that, I would say, is one of his superpowers, is that when he understands something in his core and he's committed to it, he will do what it takes to get it to work. And then even though the status quo might not be on his side initially, eventually they tend to come around. So we've seen that with SpaceX and we've seen that with Tesla. And I'm sure there are other things. But I think that there's like a strong takeaway there for young people to, you want to become really smart at things. You want to become experts, but you also want to question things deeply and say, could we do this better?
As we say that, because I agree with you wholeheartedly, but it's really hard to get up in front of people who don't really necessarily believe in your vision and try to explain it, because the pushback could just be really discouraging. And I kind of felt a little bit of it when I announced the flight around the world. You know, people were like, well, why does this have to be a solo flight? You know, why are you doing this and that? And it took just several years of standing behind this idea of reaching young children around the world through this global flight. It took, you know, a lot of years to finally get people to see the vision and then eventually support it. And I feel like we might be running into that a little bit with our next chapter and this digital hub, because our solution is not necessarily one event or one dimensional. It really serves the entire aviation industry, and it could be a lot for people to consume and understand. And then sometimes I feel like, I think everyone wants a long-term solution, but just putting in the time and the effort could be, you know, discouraging for them to follow through with a long-term vision. What are your thoughts?
I just keep going back to the founding days of SpaceX. So SpaceX was founded in March 2022. So March 14, 2022. And then on February 1st, 2023, the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated as it was re-entering the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So if you think about even that timing where the preeminent space agency was having its most difficult period, it took boldness on Elon Musk's side to say, well, I'm going to get us back to Mars without being laughed out of a room, because if NASA couldn't do it properly, who are you to think that you could get it done? And so I just really admire that tenacity and the willingness on their part to do the work to make it happen. It wasn't easy as what we're seeing, because now it's like 20 plus years after. Obviously, there has been other benefits or milestones where they've created the reusable rockets. They've landed them on these bases out in the ocean, and now here we are with this launch. So,
and to your point too, it's not like Elon Musk, you know, first try he was successful. You know, even though so much was happening, it took him a couple tries to successfully launch a rocket. There were several disappointments and you know, things not going well, and I think that just added to society or the public's idea that he's not really fit for this and he's just throwing his money away. But he pressed on, and it took a couple tries, but you know, they finally were successful. And when you look into the future, when you look into now, this is really exciting to launch the Starship rocket.
All really good stuff, Shasta. Well, now let's tune into our conversation with Lou Seno.
Our guest today on the Uplink podcast is Mr. Lou Seno. Mr. Lou Seno serves as Chairman Emeritus and Special Advisor to the JSSI Board of Directors. Before joining JSSI, Mr. Seno held senior management positions at the business aircraft units of Boeing Capital Corporation and GE Capital Solutions. Seno is very active in the aviation industry, serving on boards for organizations like GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, EAA, Experimental Aircraft Association, NAFA, the National Aircraft Finance Association, and Dreams Soar. Mr. Seno is a longtime general aviation pilot and aircraft owner with over 7,000 hours of flight time. The FAA presented the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award in 2016. Mr. Seno, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here, Shasta. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm curious, Mr. Seno, I've known you for quite a while now, and I've just admired the way that you have made an impact in aviation, especially on the youth. Considering that you are a prominent leader in aviation, it seems like you are extraordinarily accessible to young professionals. Recently, you spoke to students at the Central Florida Business Aviation Association, the career day that they just hosted. We can find you at the Embry-Riddle basketball games, industry conferences, and air shows. Broadly, you have supported several programs like Dreams Soar and scholarships to help students get into aviation. And I'm curious to know, what has been your motivation behind all of this?
Great question. Probably it has to do with my association really with Embry-Riddle. And I came to Embry-Riddle almost 30 years ago as a financial vendor. I was national sales manager of McDonnell Douglas Finance Corporation. And our Southeast United States salesman called me and said, there's a school in Daytona that wants us to finance a couple simulators. And it was Embry-Riddle. And we did those. And then fast forward in 1997, when the laws in this country changed and limited liability for piston aircraft, and Cessna built that great big factory out in Independence, Kansas. And the president of Embry-Riddle back then, Dr. Steve Sliwa, placed a big order for 172s for both campuses, over 100 airplanes. And then he called me and said, will you help me pay for these? Can you put a financing or a lease plan in place? And so I started coming to Daytona, and Dr. Sliwa left. And then Dr. Ebbs, the next president, said, I'm going to put you to work. And he put me on the president's advisory board, and then I served as a trustee. And so I've done a number of things over the years, helped start a corporate relations department. And then when I kind of went into semi-retirement, very familiar with the Daytona, Volusia County area, we moved down here. And then it just kind of everything fell into place with what's going on with the industry and the need for talent. And when I was CEO at JSSI, I launched our internship program in 2009, which is now expanded to schools beyond Embry-Riddle. Even the FAA, workforce is such a critical issue for the ongoing health of the industry. So I don't know. I guess I was just in the right place at the right time.
Well, you seem to really enjoy it, based on our experience with you. You've really helped put other young people in place for where they need to be. So I can speak for me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, hey, it's been fun.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I'm just very fortunate. I'm at a point in my life where I have the time and the inclination to do it. And there seems to be a need for it. So all the pieces kind of fit together.
So 2 weeks ago, we had Jonas Murby on. He's a principal at Aerodynamic Advisory, and he came on to talk about the aviation mechanic shortage. So how are companies like JSSI, how are they coping with the mechanic shortage today?
Michael, that's a great question. And beyond talking about it, I think certain schools are reaching out to industry and co-oping with industry. For instance, like I know Duncan out in Lincoln, Nebraska, does something with a local college to promote A&P enrollment. Of course, here at Embry-Riddle, that they could enroll more. It's just tough today to get young people to go into the technical side. But I do see, Textron bring on people in an apprenticeship program. And I think I've seen some promotion where to be a technician, you don't need a 4-year degree. You can come in with an associate degree and your A&P. And I served 6 years on the Duncan board. And I can tell you that a young man or woman with a 2-year degree and an A&P can go to somebody like Duncan and work their way up and make a very nice living. And I think industry's got to get behind it. And you mentioned GAMA. We were doing job fairs for a while at GAMA as a way to get people interested, particularly on the A&P side.
So, Mr. Seno, it's very clear you're so involved in aviation, and just the work that you're doing in terms of workforce solutions. It's a big part of why we've asked you to serve as chairman of our board because we're starting this new chapter of building an industry hub. And, you're so insightful, and you pretty much know everybody in aviation. So we're so grateful to have you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. No, I'm honored to be chairman of this initiative, and a shout out for Central Florida Business Aviation Association. This was their second annual student day. They launched it last year, and well over 300 students, not just from Embry-Riddle, had students from FIT, Central Florida, and a few other schools. But of all these young people that were there, nobody was on a pilot track. We had exhibitors. We had charter companies, management companies, insurance, finance people. It was all of what goes together to make an aircraft transaction work, exclusive of the flying side. So these were all business students with an interest and a slant toward aviation, but not necessarily flying. We heard from two great aircraft resellers and great field. Right now, the pre-owned airplane business is just, it's on fire, going very strong. And the OEMs are hiring people for sales support and marketing. So it as very apparent yesterday, right now, it's just a great time to get into aviation, even if you don't know how to fly or have no interest in learning to fly. That's only one piece of it.
That's amazing that you guys were able to showcase so many different career fields to all of these young people, because it really is an entire ecosystem that we have to continue to promote and just bring awareness that these career opportunities are available. I'd like to shift a little bit from workforce and young professionals to business aviation. So the pandemic era was really a catalyst for business aviation, and we saw interest and investments in the sector grow in a way that it probably couldn't have before. Things are starting to cool off now, but the benefits of business aviation that newcomers have discovered have proven to be a bit sticky. What are the priorities now for the business aviation sector?
Good question. Great observation. Clearly, coming out of the pandemic, anybody who could afford it were looking for ways to get off the airlines. So what you saw, and we saw this at JSSI, we had our charter customers tell us they just simply could not keep an airplane on the ground, that if they didn't have to put an airplane down for maintenance, it could fly 24/7. Now, I think that's cooled off. As somebody told me a story a few weeks ago, that what's happened is high net worth Mr. Jones gets a call from his accountant, and his accountant says, "Mr. Jones, you see you've been chartering. Do you know you spent $278,000 for you and your family to charter last month?" And then Mr. Jones kind of says, "Well, maybe United First Class isn't so bad after all." So we're seeing some people move off of charter. At JSSI, our revenues come when people fly. And I do see that if you look at Argus and some of our numbers and the other numbers, flying is off a little. It's kind of come down, but it's still above 2019 levels, which is very encouraging. It's just come off this post-COVID high, and I think the Part 91 flight departments, as long as the economy stays somewhat healthy, they're going to fly. I read something today in Corporate Jet Investor where they were quoting people from Boeing's business jet program, Airbus's business jet program, as well as Gulfstream and Bombardier. And the demand for large cabin, ultra long range aircraft remains high.
Wow.
So I think, the resellers, and again, we had two great resellers speak yesterday. They said, sure, things have cooled down, Shasta, as you said, or maybe leveled off. That craziness where people were buying airplanes without a pre-purchase inspection, kind of the same way in certain markets in the United States people were buying a home without an inspection.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Right.
cool, but it's still a very strong market, very healthy market, and people are still flying. I'm a little concerned about what's going on in Europe with this, what we're calling jet shaming. We saw our European flight hours fall off, and we've had the conversation: is a high net worth person living in France really not going to fly his airplane because he feels it's unpopular? However, there are regulatory situations coming out where we're seeing if you're going under 400 miles, you can't fly your airplane. So I think the quicker we could get SAF into the marketplace on a worldwide basis, the better. And just a shout out for our own company, if I may, but we've got a program in place with AvFuel where our customers could come to us, and if they're flying to a given city on a given day, we hook them up with AvFuel to see where they can buy SAF. And if they can't purchase SAF through us at JSSI, you could call your client services representative and we can do a carbon offset for you. So we try, and we're really trying to promote our portfolio of clients to really be green.
I recently just wrote a story for Flying Magazine for their Business Air magazine about the challenge in Europe, and they're talking about just how the SAF mandate there is very different from how it is here, whereas last year the Biden administration published the Inflation Reduction Act to boost SAF production. In Europe, it's more of a regulatory requirement for certain airports and operators to carry SAF. And I spoke to someone, and he was saying even if you were to do sort of like a book and claim deal, it's not being recognized. So you don't even get the incentive for it.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. So in Europe, things are very tough for the operators there.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we saw that, though, when that got going, we saw some fall off in activity over there.
So you mentioned JSSI and just the solutions that you've brought to market. And recently, there's also been increased investment in the aviation industry to introduce new technologies and solutions. And they seem very similar to the time when JSSI was founded, where you and the founding team there, they managed to solve a unique problem that customers would go on to love. Can you kind of take us back to those early days and maybe offer some tactical advice that young founders today might find helpful?
Happy to do that. I'll go back to probably 1988 at the time, and I've told the story before. There was really only one particular engine that had a guaranteed cost maintenance program. And if you look at the early days of business aviation and you go back to the 60s, in the days of the Learjet, the Lockheed Jetstar, or the Sabreliner, they all had these generation one or very, very early turbojet engines. They made a lot of noise. They burned a lot of fuel. They didn't have a lot of moving parts. And then along came Allied Signal, now Honeywell, and they developed a very sophisticated high bypass ratio, very fuel efficient, and very quiet stage 3 engine called a TFE 731. And everybody bought it. Falcon put it on the Falcon 10. Westwind put it on their airplane. Even Cessna put it on the Citation 3. And of course, it also powered the Lear 35. The engine did break a lot, and what was happening is the chief of maintenance or the chief pilot would always have to go down to the hall, get down the hall, and ask the CFO for some money to fix the engine, and then the operator said, we need a budgetable product here. So they came out with MSP, Maintenance Service Plan, for the 731 engine. And in 1989, when we launched, that truly was the only product out there But many 731 airplanes, a lot of people said, well, we'll just roll the dice and do it ourselves. So, and it was very expensive. If you didn't take the program when you picked your airplane up at the factory, it became rather expensive to put it on later. So we developed a program and a product to put a 731 engine on during its middle of its life. And that sort of caught on. So we kind of launched the company on the back of the 731 engine. But then we said, let's take this and let's bring this to Pratt & Whitney and let's bring this to Rolls-Royce. So I'm very proud of the fact that we were doing Rolls-Royce engines on Gulfstreams long before there was corporate care. And we were doing PT6s and JT15Ds. Those are Pratt & Whitney engines. And we did those before Pratt & Whitney came on with what they call ESP, or the Eagle Service Plan. And now all the OEMs have a program. And then there's another product out there called Engine Assurance Plan, which kind of does a good job with some of the older engines like the JT15D or the 731. But today, if you pick up if you go to Wichita to pick up a brand new Latitude or Longitude, you pretty much are going to do one of three things. You're going to take the OEM program, you're going to take JSSI, or you're going to do nothing. And we call that going naked. But most people today, they might not do anything on the airframe, but they'll do something certainly on the engines. And they'll also cover the APU if the aircraft does in fact have an APU.
Wow, it seems like it was really ahead of its time, because now you see, just even in consumer culture, if you're buying an iPhone, Apple is also selling you Apple Care.
Absolutely. Or go pick up your new car today at the dealer and they'll put about 5 or 6 different service plans in front of you, extended warranty and on tires and all sorts of things. Yes.
Yeah. So I bet there are a ton of other applications beyond engines.
Right. And I think the big distinction between a warranty and an hourly cost maintenance plan is warranties only take care of things when they break. The big distinction, whether it's us or the OEM, is that a true hourly cost maintenance plan pays for scheduled events. Hot sections, midlifes, overhauls. So when somebody said, well, I really don't need you because I'm under warranty. Well, yes and no.
Yeah, that was very insightful. So Mr. Seno, you are on the board of the National Aircraft Finance Association, and NAFA is set to host their 51st conference this week. Happy to be joining you all in Florida. It seemed like it was a great time to be in aircraft financing until the interest rates went up, combined with the bonus depreciation tax incentive that drove demand. With the interest rates much higher, is it more challenging to access capital?
Well, two great questions. And I'm going to separate the lending side and the tax side. And this week, we'll all be heading to the Ocean Reef Club in Key Largo. And I will tell you, we have a record crowd. In fact, we have so many people, we blew out the hotel and we have people staying down the street. So I guess what I'm trying to say, the aircraft finance business or aircraft finance industry, yes, interest rates have gone up, but it doesn't seem to deter people from, if they need to borrow money to buy an airplane, they will. Interest rates are still single digit, and yes, they have gone up from historic lows, but they've not gone up to the point where they're keeping people out of the market. And I think, yes, lenders today, after what happened in 2008 and 9 and 10, the transactions seem to be more conservative. They're structured correctly. Again, it's going to be a record crowd, and looking forward to being there. Just you mentioned bonus depreciation, and yes, the depreciation is not going away, but it's just it's being now tracked to where you won't be able to take it all on day one. And eventually it'll go back to a 5-year, a corporate aircraft used in Part 91 will be a 5-year asset. So it was great to get all that depreciation on day one. That was a nice benefit that goes back to the Bush 43 administration, and then it kept going for a while. But that really affects ownership. So if you're doing a lease deal, your lease rate might be slightly more because there's not as much tax incentive for the leasing company. Same thing if you're buying it, but no, the change in depreciation I don't think has affected the market at all.
As some of us get ready to go to the NAFA conference this week, what else is everyone anticipating to talk about? Are there any hot topics that the industry is really concerned about right now?
Certainly workforce development, and I'm doing a sort of a fireside chat with Mark Baker and Jack Pelton, who kind of represent the general aviation side of things. 100 low lead. And getting 100 low lead into the marketplace has become a major deal. In California, you already have a number of airports that are not selling 100 low lead. I understand that trend has worked its way up, and there's an airport or two in Washington State that are clamping down on 100 low lead. So the industry has joined together. We're all on the same page, and we have one STC that's been approved. And Michael, I think you and I may have heard Mark Baker talk about GAMA, General Aviation Modifications Inc. out of Ada, Oklahoma, does have a blanket wide STC. You do have to buy an STC, which is really the paperwork allowing you to put that in your airplane. And the cost is minimal. You do nothing to the airplane. But what my friends at AvFuel, who are working to get that fuel distributed, have said the production ramp up and the distribution is gonna take a while. So Shasta, I would say on the piston side, clearly you're going to hear a lot about 100 low lead when we're together.
I can't wait. I'm so looking forward to it.
Seems like the two sectors young people need to pay attention to right now are the energy sector, so fuel and infrastructure. A lot of investment is going into those two sectors over the next 10 years, in terms of bringing these fuel to market and, building up airports.
We are going to have a panel, which will be Pete Bunce, chairman of GAMA. And we are fortunate enough to have the CFO of Joby. Joby's got a great advanced air mobility product. It's flying. I think people think it will get to certification in the early group. And so we've got the Joby CFO who's committed, and you're going to hear some discussion next week on advanced air mobility. And clearly, the FAA right now is, they're challenged. They're looking for engineers. We hear this at GAMA meetings all the time. The people with the traditional airplanes, such as Textron and Gulfstream, are always saying, they can't get enough FAA attention to get new products through the marketplace. And now if you look at this plethora of advanced air mobility vehicles, the FAA's got to bring some engineers on. And I was just in a meeting back in October with the engineering school at Embry-Riddle and told the new dean, if you think people are looking for pilots and mechanics, the number 3 would be engineers.
Yeah, I actually got an email from the FAA. They're looking for, in addition to several different sectors, but air traffic controllers.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah, they're going to have a hiring window in early May. They asked me to do some promotion for them. So,
oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it just goes back to how the industry as a whole is really growing, and we need talent now more than ever.
Absolutely, across all sectors.
Well, Mr. Seno, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And
we appreciate everything that you do, not only for Dreams Soar, but all of aviation. Thank you.
Oh, I'm honored to be able to do so. Happy to do it. Shasta, I'll look forward to seeing you this week in Florida. So
great.
Should be a good session. Michael, take care.
Thank you, Mr. Seno. That was good.
You know, Michael, it was so wonderful to have Mr. Lou Seno join us on this episode of Uplink.
I totally agree. That's my guy. I so grateful for the role he's played in my life and my professional development. So I still get amazed when I hear every time he talks, he has just this encyclopedic knowledge of the industry and of people and airplane and systems. It's like pull out a notepad and pen and, you know, just get ready to copy, because he's just going to give you so much to take away and to put into play. So I really appreciate him coming on.
I want to just take a moment and acknowledge Mr. Lou Seno and his wife, Christine Seno, because when I was a student at Embry-Riddle, I had this idea of, you know, flying around the world, and it was just really an idea. I had thought a few things through, but it was once I got to meet him in person, we had organized a dinner. So it was Mr. Lou Seno, his wife, and I. We met for dinner. And for someone like him to take the time to sit down and ask me questions and give his advice, and then, you know, also make certain connections. And you know, throughout the dinner, he was like, I'm gonna introduce you to this person and this person. You know, it ended up being a 3.5 hour dinner. And as a young professional with this dream, for someone like Lou Seno to do that, it really empowered me. And I felt like that dinner was a turning point, because now, you know, it's still an idea, but someone sees it, they believe in it, and they're going to help me get to the next level. And then, you know, throughout the years, he has been with us. You know, anytime something came up, whether it was a mechanical delay when I was flying around the world, or you know, just even the governance side of Dreams Soar, he has always stepped up and supported with, you know, opening up his resources. He's just done so much. And Mr. Lou Seno taught me the true meaning of what mentorship looks like. And thanks to him, I have a model that I aspire to be like.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we could easily have talked to him for another 2 hours. So we'll definitely have him back on for a different segment.
So that is it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for our next episode on Monday.